Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Today my guest is Rafer Roberts. He is the writer for Valiant Entertainment's new series, A&A, The Adventures of Archer and Armstrong. Rafer, welcome to Comic Culture.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's get started. Archer and Armstrong is a series that was launched in the early 90s, and you are overseeing sort of a reboot of these characters in the year 2016. So what can you tell us about Archer and Armstrong?
Sure. Well, first you have Armstrong. He's a 7,000-year-old immortal drunken warrior poet who's been drinking his way throughout history. And then you also have Archer, who's a teenage ex-fundamentalist super ninja who has been trained since birth to assassinate Armstrong. When he discovers that his entire life is a lie, Archer joins up with Armstrong, and together they're fighting against the weird and surreal masters of the world, like secret societies and crazy monsters, but also fighting amongst themselves like an old married couple. It's basically, I've been describing it like a Neil Simon play, but starring just like the Gilgamesh and just a super ninja.
Oh, that's a great description. I had the good fortune to read a copy of the issue #1, and what struck me was that there's a really good balance behind humor, I guess that Neil Simon component, and there's also some adventure going on that puts the characters into some interesting positions as they have to go into the magic satchel of Armstrong. So as you're writing this, as you're coming up with these the concepts of what the story is going to be about, how are you connecting the characters, the humor, to the adventure and what we would normally consider to be sort of the adventure story tropes?
Well, when starting to write any of their adventures, I have to keep in mind the most important thing is that the story is always about their friendship, the relationship between these two very strange men. And whatever adventure and weirdness that they get into needs to serve that in some way. So whether it's where they go into Armstrong's magic satchel in search of something, that something is for Armstrong to make good on something he's done bad in the past, and now Archer is trying to understand both why Armstrong's gone in without him and also the nature of the sins of Armstrong's past. So while they are fighting little trash goblins and monsters and fishmen, it's all done for the point of exploring their friendship. And really, for me to be able to write 3 pages worth of really fun back and forth argumentative dialogue.
And there's an element of tragedy because you mentioned friendship, and with Armstrong being a 7,000-year-old immortal, and you put this in the first part of the issue, he's had a lot of friends like Archer throughout his life. And he seems to be, I think what you're doing in this first arc is you're sort of recalling those relationships as Armstrong is trying to find something to honor his friend. So this idea of friendship, when you're putting these stories together, how do you make the audience kind of get the sense of this friendship? How do you put it together that there's a lot of that bickering going on, but how do you let us know that deep down there's this connection that's, you know, really strong between these characters, and it is almost like the odd couple or an old married couple?
I think that's really through the character's actions. You see how Archer, while he's angry with his friend, as soon as he finds out that he's in trouble, goes to save him. And then when he finds out that all of this is his friend's fault, still tries to save him, but yells at him that the entire time after that. It's really, I take it from friends and family, that you argue with the ones you love the most. I think there's a certain relationship that people have with like their brother or their sister that they can be completely horrible to them, but they're absolutely good friends and they love each other very much. But yeah, it's really through their actions. You can see it. Armstrong feels guilty about the things in his past, and he treats Archer poorly because he doesn't want to go down that same path again. He's still opening up to the rest of the world. He shut himself off, Armstrong has, for a very long time. having seen all of his friends and all of his loved ones die in the past, and he's fearful in a way that the same thing will happen with Archer. He doesn't. I mean, he's opening up, but still trying to keep himself from being hurt again.
Yeah, and that's an aspect that we see a lot in superhero comics. You see a character like Thor who's supposed to be immortal, and yet, he's always making friends with, either Captain America or Jane Foster or something like that. So you're looking at an immortal character as somebody who's just afraid. I don't want to go down that road anymore. I don't want that pain to kind of get me. And it's also funny because he's the older character, but he's written as being so irresponsible that Archer becomes sort of the father figure. You have to do the things the right way, which is a fun kind of turn on the characters. Now, I'm not terribly familiar with the original Barry Windsor Smith series. Was this sort of humor always in the series, or is this something that you were able to add to these characters?
It was always a very funny, somewhat surreal series from the Barry Windsor Smith days. The character of Armstrong is basically exactly the same. Archer, however, used to be more of a shaved head, kind of moony type of ninja. Fred Van Lente, in the first 25 issues of the reboot from about 2 or 3 years ago, changed it to a more creationist, super fundamentalist Christian style cult. It seemed more modern in that aspect. But yeah, the humor's been throughout, the heart's been throughout. This is me basically just picking up the reins and trying not to screw it up.
And how far along do you plan your work? Because I know some writers are known for having a spreadsheet where they've got 50 issues laid out, and this is what's going to happen in every issue, and with very little deviation, that's what's going to happen. Are you sort of in that camp, or are you in the sort of camp of, well, I've got this page, I don't know what's going to happen at the end, and I don't know what's going to happen on the next page?
I've got the next few arcs planned in my head. Up to 16, definitely. Up to 25 is a little bit more nebulous. And then I have ideas that could go another 3 years after that. But for those, I'm keeping very loose. The thing is, we're working in a shared universe. So I don't want to get too locked into anything. Something else could happen in some other book that could change or derail plans. So what I try to do is be very loose. Be like the leaf in the breeze, so to speak. So if anything comes along, I can react to it. But that's also the fun part. I've been making comics by myself basically for 16 years. Getting a chance to work in the shared universe environment, working with other writers and all the other artists, it's like comics camp. All the different ideas coming at me and getting into play. Maybe we can talk about it a little bit later, but I'm co-writing a Shadow Man one-shot with Faith writer Jody Hauser, and being able to collaborate with other writers to create one story. It's absolutely amazing. I'm having the time of my life here.
So maybe we could talk about that now, because the shared universe is kind of interesting, and that's where, sort of like the Marvel or DC universe, the events that happen in one book in principle are happening in the same universe as another book. So to use a very bad example, what happens in a Superman book could have implications in a Wonder Woman book. In this case,
right.
What happens in Faith could have, that ripple could go through Archer and Armstrong. So even if you have those ideas, you have to be flexible. I think that gives you a little bit more of a way to be creative, because you always sort of have to adapt to what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. There's already been a few things that happened in other books that I didn't know were going to happen during the original pitch process. So I've already adapted a few upcoming storylines to fit those things. And
with this Shadow Man book that you have coming up, working with another writer, is this something where the two of you are just bouncing ideas off each other? Are you, like, you write a draft and then she'll write a draft, or how does that work?
We haven't actually made it to the scripting stage just yet. Right now we're about to finalize the outline, but it's basically been like you said. Jody comes up with an idea, I bounce another idea off of her, she bounces an idea off of me, and a narrative takes place. And then we write it all up and bounce it off the editor, and then they bounce it back to us, and we'll refine based on their notes. And it's just basically we're trying to get the best story that we can through this collaboration. And so far, I think we are right there. I'm very excited by this story. It's going to be super cool, super nuts, taking place in the future. Shadow Man it's going to be very heavy metal, very that sort of feel to it, I think.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Shadow Man was the character created by Bob Hall, who was the musician by day and then the superhero by night?
Yes. I always liked that because there was, in the original Valiant universe, like his first appearance was actually before his first appearance, like in the background of, I'm going to blow it. I think it was a Ninjak issue that there was just a saxophone player in like a jazz bar. So then like the next issue, it turned out that that guy was Shadow Man the whole time. So yeah, I thought it's always been a cool character and a fan favorite, and people seem pretty stoked, not knowing anything about the story that we're actually writing, just the fact that we're doing a Shadow Man, that people are pretty excited by that.
So let me ask you a question about the characters that Valiant has. Valiant was a company that sort of, they started, I guess, about 25, 26 years ago, and they really sort of took off in that 90s comic boom. And a lot of the characters, I recall sort of being associated with that time period. And some publishers, their books are firmly entrenched in the 90s, and it's almost like they're typecast. You're not going to see that character come back. But Valiant has been very successful in recent years, taking these characters and cutting them down and getting rid of all that 90s kind of bloat, I guess, and just going to the core of the characters. So when you see a character like Shadow Man or Archer and Armstrong, and you just kind of whittle it down to that core, how does that help you as a writer to just kind of blow that stuff off and just start from scratch?
Well, I think it also helps that there isn't that much of it. Like, even when it was coming out in the 90s, it paused for a while. There was a few years in the early 2000s where the book was coming out. And even those books were very different from the ones that were coming out in the early 90s. The current Valiant universe has only been around for about 4 years. So there's not that much history with it going on now. So as a writer, it's very freeing because there's still a lot of opportunity to make a mark, to actually, how do I phrase this? Like, think of like the early days of Marvel when Kirby was just introducing character after character that defined the company and those characters for generations. And coming into Valiant, while I wasn't there during day one, I'm there during like day 5. So maybe there's still an opportunity to have a huge impact for stories long after I'm gone. So it's very exciting.
Well, there is some exciting news coming out of Valiant. I was reading in just the recent days that Valiant has signed a number of artists, colorists to exclusive contracts. And now, as a writer, knowing that there's that stable of talent, how does that help you, either approach stories or that working environment, knowing that you've got people that you can count on day in and day out, month in and month out?
It's great, honestly, knowing because both David LaFuente, the artist on A&A, and Brian Reber, the colorist, were both signed to exclusive deals. So knowing that they're going to be around, not get poached by another company, it allows me to visualize the stories that much further out. I can write scripts further out knowing that they'll be the ones illustrating and coloring it, and it really is helpful. I can do shorthand. I can do like knowing how David's going to look at my script and either follow something to the letter or just go off on his own. It's very helpful just from a process standpoint and from a consistency standpoint, having the book look the same on day 1 as it does on day 10.
So let's talk about that partnership that you have with the artist. I mean, is it something now where you're able to, like you said, you've got that shorthand that you can kind of just slip into when you're writing a script. Is this something where he's got free reign to kind of play with the idea and then you can kind of adapt to it, or is it something where it's like, you just kind of give him something and know that he's going to deliver it the way that you're envisioning it?
Since I draw comics myself, I tend to write with the artists in mind. I don't like locking in an artist and saying you must draw it this way. We're hiring these great artists to do the job the best they can. So what I write my script are is mostly suggestions. Like, this is how I see it. If you can tell this sequence, this action, and maintain the emotion that I'm going for, however the panels are broken up, however the staging is, make it good. Just tell the story the best you can. I'm not too worried. There's been times where I've written a page that's 4 panels. David's turned it into 24. He's taken a few panels that were ending one page and moved them to the next to start it, and it works great. So, been told that I write like an artist, which I take as a compliment. Yeah, I just want I'm just sort of starting the ball rolling. Everybody else has to finish it. And then once everything's done, we go back through. I can tweak some dialogue in order to fit the art better. So yeah, I mean, it's not like, here it is, have fun with it, and then at the end it's like, none of these words fit with this anymore. We go back and we make sure everything jives, and I think it's making for some great comics.
Well, I would agree. I mean, I really enjoyed that first issue, and I think that the pacing of the book was really good, and the way that you were able to combine the action sequences along with some real character interaction. The fact that the art was able to capture, I think there's just one scene when he's talking about, I hope you have pants on, and you were able to, I mean, he's able to give you the expression on the guy's face where you just realize either it's a combination of horrible and hopeful at the same time, that he hopes that this guy has pants on when he comes in into the hotel room. And we find out, of course, something else has happened entirely. Yeah. So there's a lot of those surprises, and so working with the same creative team for a number of books, that's something that, like we said, that makes you feel comfortable that you can create these new ideas. Has there been something that you've seen in the art that suddenly clicks an idea in your head and you think, well, a couple of issues down the line, I'm going to throw this in because of that one thing that was in the background, like a saxophone player in an issue of Ninjak?
Maybe not so much specifically, but as soon as I knew that David was going to be the artist, just having seen his art on other books, such as some Batgirl stuff, I knew that Archer's sister, Mary Maria, was going to be playing a much larger role, just because I really enjoy the way he draws her, and then I gave her a whole squadron of other Sisters of Perpetual Darkness, these murder nuns, so to speak. So they're going to be playing a much larger role as the series progresses. And that comes basically just so I can see David continue to draw these characters, because they're great.
What I really find fascinating is that you seem to be having a lot of fun with this process. It's commerce because you get paid to do this, and at the same time it's self-expression. So how are you able to handle that monthly deadline and yet at the same time still write the characters that you're enjoying writing? I mean, do you feel guilty collecting the check at the end of the month?
Yeah, it can be tough. I mean, it has to be fun. I still actually have a day job. So the comics is the job that I wish I could do full time. My day job's not as much fun. Comics needs to be fun for me to enjoy it. Otherwise, why have 2 jobs? Comics has always been a form of therapy for me in a way, in terms of getting the thoughts that David Lynch is possibly one of the most disturbing filmmakers out there. Some of the images he puts out are just horrific, terrifying, or just weird. But if you ever see him, he's about like the most gentle, sweetest guy around. It's because he's getting all of that out. It's a very cathartic method, his filmmaking, and that's fairly much the same as me, whether it's drawing or writing. With drawing, it's more zen-like. I can relax and deal with the day. With writing, it's getting these weird thoughts and ideas just out of my head, so I can actually go out and be a real human being. So the fact that I get to write a fun book, it's very helpful, and I think it shows. If you're not having fun making any piece of art, if you're not enjoying it, or if it's not having an effect on the artist, him or herself, it shows in the final product, and it becomes just fake. It just doesn't feel real. It just feels like, oh, here's something that somebody was making to make a buck. It doesn't feel like somebody cared about it. Um, and I want everything that I work on to have that feeling of Rafer gave a crap.
In my spare time, I also like to sit down at the drawing table. It's one of those things where you always, at least in my case, I've got to find time to sit down and do some drawing. But there's something about just starting from an empty page and doing some rough pencils to finished inks or something like that, and then having a whole story. Eventually, by the time I'm dead, I'll have a finished story. But because I never get to sit down at the drawing table. But there's just something about it that is just so empowering, because you can shut off the rest of the world and you can just focus on, this is what I'm doing now. I can tell the story that I want to tell, no interruptions. I'm not worried about an audience, at least in my case.
Right.
And it's sort of that therapy that you don't have to pay $50 an hour for. And I think that I try to encourage as many people as possible, if they've got some time, they should try and do some creative venture, whether it's playing the guitar or finger painting. Let's
Yep.
try and be creative, because it's a great outlet. So let's talk about the comics that you do other than Archer and Armstrong. You say you've been doing comics for about 16 years. What are those books?
My main self-published book is called Plastic Farm. It's on a brief hiatus right now. Just the paying gigs are taking up all of the creative time, which is fine. But at some point, I am going to get back to it. Plastic Farm's story of a guy who's losing his mind. Madness reshapes reality, many strange, terrifying, hilarious ways. I've got that pitched down. I'm saying it like 16 years in a row. It's a fun, weird, surreal book. It's basically me just having therapy on the comics page. I also do one called Nightmare the Rat, which is a full tabloid newspaper-sized story of this little demon steals people's teeth, throws them up in the air, dances in the moonlight, in the old, like, early 1900s comics aesthetic, like Winsor McCay or like George Harriman. Probably the one that most people have seen for me is working with writer Justin Jordan. We did a bootleg comic called Thanos and Darkseid, Carpool Buddies of Doom, which is just Thanos and Darkseid driving around, drinking coffee, having conversations.
That's funny. I've seen that, and I did not know that was your work.
Yeah, that actually got us the job at Valiant. Warren Simons saw that, hired Justin and I to start doing backup stories for all the anniversary issues, and then that's when I realized that I really enjoyed working for Valiant, and sent a package of all my other writings in the hopes that they'd let me stick around.
That seems like it worked.
Yeah, it seems so.
So I guess so we are running short. We have about 3 minutes worth of time left in our show right now. If someone were interested in getting into the comics industry, I mean, it seems like you spent a number of years sort of self-publishing and working on different projects that really interested you. And I guess if you were to give advice, would it be to work on something that you have passion for, and then try and reach out to some folks, or go to cons, or what would you suggest?
I think it's all of that. Like, the one piece of advice I always give is, if you want to make comics, make comics. It seems pretty backward, but when you're going to talk to an editor, trying to get something published, you can go thought. It's the same thing. somebody a script, but if you hand somebody a finished comic, they know what you're capable of. They know what you can do. Plus, it really puts you in, starts giving you the good habits of actually finishing something that you start. Uh, so many people I see will start a script or start a comic and get like 3 pages into it and like, this isn't any good, and start working on something else. And all you end up with is a pile of half finished crap. Even if you get 3 pages into it and think it's bad, you got to finish that thing. Whether you show it to anybody or just put that in a drawer, at least it's done. And then you take what you learned making that and put it into the next thing. It's always the next thing that gets better from the thing from before, and eventually you'll be good. Fingers crossed I'll get there someday.
Well, that's great advice, because a lot of times we get discouraged and we don't want to finish something. You know, you draw something, you say, oh, it looks terrible. But if you never finish it, you're never going to, well, one, get that sense of accomplishment, and two, say, I'm ready to try something better because I learned those lessons on that other project that didn't quite work out. So this hiatus that you're on, when do you think, or do you have a timetable, anything that's burning inside you that you want to tell other than Archer and Armstrong that we can expect to see sometime soon?
There's a couple short mini-series that I'm working on with other artists. They're all in the various pre-production, getting pitches ready for other companies, so they're really in no position to start talking about, but there's some other stuff I'm working on that hopefully turns into actual things.
All right, well, I'm being told that we've run out of time.
Okay.
Rafer, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for watching Comic Culture. We hope to see you again soon.